Hey everyone, and welcome to what is undoubtedly, unquestionably, and most definitely your favorite YouTube series, because it's my favorite YouTube series. And so if it's mine, why wouldn't it be yours? It just only makes logical sense to me. So not another demo. As you know, if you've watched any of our previous 26 episodes, not another demo is where we talk with a vendor in very real terms. We get right into the heart of what a company is doing for their customers. The ground rules, no acronyms. We can't use them either, guys. So feel free to ask us if we use them. No marketing jargon, and of course, no PowerPoint slides. This is just a conversation, and we are thrilled this week to have with us Darrin Slater and John Seaman from Axonius. And of course, I've got Lloyd with me today as well. So I'm not running solo this week, which is extra good because who needs to hear more of my voice? Nobody. So with that, Darrin, John, I'll have you guys introduce yourselves a little bit more. I know we're going to talk about asset management and like specifically around asset management for cybersecurity, which is a fascinating topic and one that we haven't talked about yet. So I'm excited about it. But do a brief introduction of yourself, and then my go-to start question is we've got meetings galore, right? My calendar every day is an absolute hot mess of meetings. So if I'm looking to carve out an hour to talk with a vendor, why would that be Axonius?
Yeah, great question. I'll start off just introducing myself, and I'll let Darrin introduce himself. We'll go from there. Again, I'm John Seaman. I'm one of the regional sales directors at Axonius. I cover accounts in the North Central, and that's what I do here at Axonius. And I'll let Darrin take over. He's kind of my partner in crime here.
Hi there, I'm Darrin Slater. I'm one of the senior systems engineers here with Axonius. I've been here about a year, and I actually cover the Mid-Atlantic for our organization, as well as currently I'm helping and pitching in for the greater New York metropolitan area as well.
Yeah, so kind of on to why you would take a meeting with us. I think that's a great question. I usually ask that every time we get on a demo. Darrin can attest that. I'm like, why did you choose to spend 45 minutes to talk to sales guys?
So let me ask you, why are we here?
yeah. But I mean, really, there's a reason why. I think it's because the problem that we're looking at trying to address with asset management is pervasive, and it's something that a lot of people deal with. But for me personally, my goal is to always have a educational demo and session where we're not going to talk a lot about marketing. We're not going to talk a lot about fluff. We're going to talk about ideas, methodologies, and tactics that my prospects, my customers can take away with maybe some action items so that they can say, hey, you know what? This was informative and I learned something. So whether they buy from me or not, they walked away knowing, hey, that was a great conversation, and they feel they've educated themselves and they're able to better protect their environments because of it. That's from a personal side. From a technological side, I think that the methodology with which we attack asset management is unique. We do it without agents, without scanners. And when we go down that rabbit hole, maybe a little bit later, it opens up people's minds to ideas of how they could address this issue, even on their own, even without Axonius.
No agents, no scanners. That is definitely a rabbit hole that we will go down at some point here. So, I mean, in all honesty, and Lloyd, I think you'll agree. I mean, I think the organizations that we've talked to and all the previous episodes have had like a product to do something, right? And I know you guys do, but we have not really talked about like cybersecurity asset management. In fact, I kind of wonder if a lot of the people that are listening, and maybe at least one of the people that's hosting, even knows what that means. So can you guys give us like what does cybersecurity asset management mean?
Sure. So from my perspective as the systems engineer, what we're doing is we're harnessing the capability of all of the technologies that a customer already has in place, right? All of the platforms that are already there, they've already invested in it. As their networks have grown homogeneously, very bric-a-brac all over the place, right? Yeah. None of those technologies really work together. They don't communicate together, and they don't really do a good job of helping the customer get at the heart of what they have, and begin to ask questions about various things about their inventory or their environment. We look at asset management, inventory asset management as a cybersecurity issue, in the sense that you can't protect what you don't know that you have. So trying to identify a gap, like where is my agent not installed, or where has my agent not checked in for 150 days, we perceive that to not only be just an asset management problem, but a very serious security problem. And so that's sort of how we approach things. We can certainly do a lot of other things as well, just how many of things, and enumerating, and finding out, do we have coverage here, there, wherever. But we definitely resonate. A lot of security teams really are very piqued. They're very interested when we start talking to them about this platform.
So, okay, so I've got like my endpoint solution, and my SIM, and my CASB, and my DLP, and my LMNOP, and I'm not going to explain what any of those are except for the LMNOP, which is my favorite episode of Sesame Street. But so I've got all these different. I got to get those corny jokes in for Anthony, otherwise he'll never watch it. So I've got all these different technologies, and I don't have like I'm just trying to understand. Like, I'm going to different places to understand, oh, this is here, and my endpoint is only on 75% of my machines, and my SIM is only doing this sort of thing. Dive in a little bit further, if you would, Darrin, on what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. And this really speaks to the heart of what we do and why we're different, and people's ears perk up when we say no agent and and no scanner.
Yeah.
Because what we're doing is we're just for the most part, we're tapping into APIs. Most of these vendor products that our customers have already invested in, they have APIs. So what we do is we have software connectors that we call adapters. We have nearly 350 of those. We build them very rapidly. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. And what we do is they're basically filling out a web form in the GUI. We need to know where that console, we're talking to the management consoles. I should probably specify that. Not every single system, not every single thing that's out there. We're going directly to the management console for that vendor technology. So we need to know where that is. We need some credentials. We usually need like a read-only service account, whatever the API needs to be able to tap into sort of metadata about the devices and the users, and maybe even the software that's installed on that thing. And then we pull all of that metadata back through those API calls, right? And then we put it into our database, and we'll talk a little bit about the architecture, I'm sure, in this call. But that database then sits, and we then have something that we call the query wizard. It's a very simple, just a drop-down filter. You're just saying, show me where McAfee exists, right, or where it runs. So we're pulling data back by grabbing API calls, metadata from API calls into one central location, and sort of breaking down those walls in those technologies where they're not communicating together.
And
so, go ahead,
Matt. I was just going to say, maybe we could even take a couple steps back too, just kind of talking a little bit more in depth about the foundations of this. When you look at the CIS controls, when you look at NIST framework, the very first building block is, what are your assets? Right. What are the software that is installed on these assets? An actual inventory. And when we talk to customers, I never have someone come to me that says, I don't have an inventory. I have people that come to me and they say, I have 7 different inventories. They don't match up. And the real issue is, I don't have confidence in them. And that's really what we're trying to address, is this confidence issue, and they don't have confidence for a couple of reasons. I think there's a lot of them, but the 3 ones I see are, there's kind of it's not comprehensive. It doesn't touch everything. There's a lot of unknowns, so to speak, so they're like, I don't know if it's really all there. Number 2 is that it's not granular enough. They may only have a device name and a serial number, and that's it. They don't know anything else about the device, and it's just something they got from when they ordered it off of their, manufacturer's website. And then maybe number 3 is that data's not fresh. I've seen a lot of teams spend 2, 3, 4 weeks building out a granular, comprehensive inventory, but by the time they then go to the the CISO or the board or whatever to report on it, it's out of date. It's not fresh anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's really the issue we're looking at addressing. And so I just wanted to go there, and we can go down that rabbit hole some too. But for us, then, when we looked at the issue of how do we fix this, we realized that the problem is this disparity of all these solutions, all these tools. They're just not connecting, they're not talking to each other. And we realized that theoretically, if we could get all that information in one place, we could, aggregate it, deduplicate it, and correlate it. And if we could do that multiple times a day, we could build out a credible, comprehensive asset inventory because, the totality of your technology stack should be the totality of your environment. And that's really where we kind of came to play in what we've built out.
So is this going to show us like endpoints and what's on them? Is it more like, I guess, can you give me like a very specific scenario of something that you guys would capture or look at?
Sure. So the nature of this problem and how people usually focus on it is they'll collect this data from these consoles, put them into a bunch of spreadsheets, and then try to compare those values. It's very error prone. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
And as soon as they collect the data, it's out of date.
Right.
So
right.
what we're doing is by bringing it all in, we then have the ability to pull lots and lots of different things. So to your point, with figuring out, do all my Windows devices that are checked into AD have McAfee or some other endpoint agent? I can use my query to drop down and basically build out those conditions, right? And then I'm presented with a list of systems, and I can see which of the agents, which of the technologies we've tapped into to see that, so we can see the overlap, right? And then when I drill into one of those systems, each one of our technologies, whether it's an endpoint agent, a cloud platform, something like AD that's managing the address space and various elements about it, they all bring in many different fields. So if you think about the things that are in an endpoint agent, it's going to tell me, maybe the scan group, and if there were any threats associated with it. It's going to give me basic stuff like IP address, MAC address, the name, if it's on a domain, things like that. But then each one of these adapters, each one of these connections into that vendor product is going to give me a whole slew of very specific things. So in AD, it might show me the different OU groups and various different things that it's connected to, or is LAPS installed, is the hard drive encrypted, various things that are exposed through the API we can pull in.
Interesting. What I like what you're hearing is a bit of a fix to what has always been a pet peeve of mine when you talk to security vendors and they say, and because I always like to ask, like, how do you fit into the rest of the security ecosystem? And they go, oh, we have APIs, or, and you're like, oh, great. But those never get configured. So now I'm going to have the security product as a total island, or, and then I think if I'm hearing this right, a lot of organizations, and Lloyd certainly chime in here as well, have lots of security islands out there, or just inventory islands. And so what you guys are saying is you can use the APIs to connect all these systems and then pull everything back into Axonius where people can have access to all of this different information.
Yeah, and I think I want to add to that, Matt. Something that's sometimes you can struggle with is that you get a large number of APIs you have to manage, and sometimes they break, sometimes they need support. So in your connectors, I'm curious too, like, what does an organization need to be preparing for to connect all these different tech, that they already have in place with these connectors?
Excellent question. So our documentation is completely open to the public. We have very comprehensive instructions for every adapter. So if I go into connect an adapter, we're going to click on the name of the vendor. First, we'll search for it, if it's Cisco or McAfee or CrowdStrike or whatever it is, right? You click on that, you say add connection, and then you're presented with a fairly short web style form. We need to know where the console is. Usually there's a service account that needs to be built. And when we come to that aspect, like, okay, well, what permissions do I need? Mostly our permissions, our requirements are read-only or least privilege style accounts. Now, some of these adapters or these APIs are very, very specific. Azure right off the top. I mean, you have to build like an app in their console. So what we have is in our instructions, you can click into the instructions first of all, right from our GUI. But then once you get there, it goes through and tells you all of the different fields in our adapter sort of drop down of what every one of those are. But then if there is a very specific set of conditions or permissions that we need for those users, we spell that out. And even on we'll have screenshots of the Amazon console of where you need to go and copy and paste for the role and all of those fun things. So we try to be as comprehensive as possible. I will say during the POC, or proof of concept, sorry, acronym, proof of concept, when a customer wants to connect these adapters, that's part of what I do, right? If they need help to understand all of that, that's what I'm there for. But frankly, most of them read the information, and by the time we have our first sort of check-in call, they're already up and running. Frankly, it's very, very easy to set up. So,
okay, all right, I'm catching on. I'm always the last one to get it. That's all right. That's all right. So you talked about that you've got, I think you said 350 or something like that connectors. So my guess is that you've got like all the big names, and you listed off some of them. I'm sure we could go through the alphabet soup of all the big security vendors, and those are all good. Most companies have got like the one or two oddball solutions, or maybe a startup solution that they like that they've brought in before everyone else has, sort of thing. So how does the process of because you said you guys can add them, so like what does that look like? Or
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, John, you want to go ahead?
No, and I'll take it real quick if you don't mind. It's pretty simple. The reason why we have so many adapters is all driven by customer request. And we've either built them in POC or post POC, proof of concept, and it comes down to really what's your use case? Is the data that you want to bring into Axonius available to us in some form or fashion? Can we get it through the API? Is there documentation for that API? And in some cases that doesn't exist at all, especially if you have a custom built app in house. Let's just not say it's a startup. Let's say there's a custom built
that's
app.
a great point.
It's not off the shelf. And so what we have are some generic ways to get information in. So we can ingest JSON, CSV. We can tap into multiple SQL flavors, and that's typically when I go into a large enterprise. They've got their own database that they've built out somehow, proprietary themselves, and I'll use our SQL adapter to bring all those things in. And when you're building it out, you don't have to worry about, Axonius doesn't support these fields. If we've got the columns and whatever we're going after, we'll automatically import them and bring them into Axonius, and they're indexed and ready to search and pivot on any other data points across all of the other adapters. And so it's very simple to do. It's very fast to make them too. I won't put our development team onto any time frames, but it's pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
I can attest to the fact that in the context of proof of concepts, there have been numerous times where a customer says just what you said. Well, you say you can do this pretty fast. We want to see it.
Yeah.
They give us,
that does not surprise me.
An adapter that we haven't encountered yet, a technology. And as long as they can give us the API swagger or the documentation, or at least a firm grasp of what's available to it, maybe the vendor already has that online and we can look at it, and we understand that we can tap into that and get to that, then yeah, we're happy to usually do that. If we can do it in the context of the POC, we are happy to do that. Sometimes it's as easy as, and I do want to point out the custom stuff that you were talking about. We had a customer that had a service provider that kind of managed their endpoint. They had an agent that loaded onto their endpoints and fed data back to this service provider. And they said, well, we want that thing. And so we had to contact the service provider. We had a big discussion. They agreed to it, and we found out that they have an Elastic backend. That's what they're tapping into. So we just sort of temporarily repurposed our Elastic adapter. Briefly, we had our I call them the adapter factory. It's our team that writes these adapters. We had our subject matter expert get in there, pulled some data back. You sort of saw the structure of it, and then we built an adapter custom built for this customer, popped it into the POC, and that was a very, very big checkbox for just our agility and our passion to do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I will say from my day job position, I can tell you that people that are looking at buying products are definitely looking at ones that are like partnering with them, because something that is just strictly out of the box is probably not going to, work exactly. And, if the vendors that I choose to work with can work with me versus forcing me into their, bucket, I think that's a big plus as well. Light, I think you were going to say something a minute ago.
Yeah, and maybe Darrin, you covered it with your response there, but because I work in the healthcare vertical, we encounter a lot of different systems that prevent us from really doing traditional security controls or tools that we'd want to put on there, like PACS systems, for example. Radiology is a space and biomeds is a space where the technology grew up independent of the rest of IT. And so it gets difficult to leverage into those systems. So when you think about a healthcare environment, how would you guys approach handling those types of systems where there's FDA approval or they're closed, but we still need to maintain an asset inventory and understand the security vulnerabilities?
Sure. So, and John, you might have some experience with this that you can share as well, but we do have several of the adapters that cover products that collect data from those sorts of devices like Medigate and other vendors, right? And so, and the same with, I can't say that again, for like SCADA type environments. It's an acronym. I don't know what it stands for.
Operational technology.
I know. I
go there.
To have a cheat sheet, guys. I forgot to put it there.
We could go around the horn. I don't know SCADA either. So
I can't remember what it stands for.
I know, right? But anyway, industrial controls. Let's describe it like that.
There we go.
Are very, very sensitive. This things that control oil rigs and control systems for trains and stuff like that. These are very life and death sensitive style systems. They will not let you put anything on it. So how do they collect data from those types of environments? Well, oftentimes they're scanning network traffic, right? And so there are solutions that are pulling data off of the network and then manipulating that or looking at it and doing that. And so what we do is we go to that source. We're not going directly to necessarily the medical devices, but there might be something out there that is collecting data in some way. So that's usually the solution to a situation like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll even
that's a huge issue, and I don't know. I heard recently that our gas infrastructure was important, but
right? Yeah, something about that.
Something like that. Yeah, I'll add. I had an interesting roundtable discussion with about 14 CISOs, specifically in healthcare, just last week, and the same questions came up. If I scan that with a vulnerability assessment scanner, it'll knock it over. Newer technologies don't do that anymore. Like we're not looking at the same kind of thing happening with newer hardware inside of hospitals, but some of the older stuff that will happen, and you can't let that transpire. So you're in this weird conundrum as a healthcare professional. I'm supposed to protect the environment, but do it in a way that doesn't crash the systems that protects the patient. But in order to protect the patient, I have to protect the environment. So you're in this like catch-22 conundrum, and that was what our conversation was about. And one of the things we brought up was bringing in a variety of information sources. A lot of people just think, I'm going to bring in my endpoint agent tools into Axonius. But we say, no, let's bring in the CM, let's bring in your configuration database management solution. Let's bring in your SIM. Let's bring in your antivirus agent, your vulnerability scanner. But what's really interesting is when we start to bring in network data, routers, switches, firewalls, VPNs, virtualized infrastructure, as well as cloud infrastructure. We're pulling from those different data sources. And so you're putting multiple cameras into this environment. I like to think of it as like at the end zone of a football field. If there is a contested play and there's only one camera, it's going to take a long time to figure out what happened, especially if it was at a bad angle. But if we can bring in multiple cameras and it's 360 degrees, we've got the matrix going on, the refs not only are going to be able to make the right call, but they're going to be able to make it in a much faster time frame. Because that time to remediation, that time to identification is huge. And so what we're doing is bringing in all these different data sources to give you multiple angles so that you can accurately identify what happened in a expedient manner. I'll put it that way. So all that to line up, one of my favorite data sources is network layer, because it can basically turn your infrastructure into a passive asset detection tool. If it's on the network, it's going to have a heartbeat. The IP address is going to be there somewhere. And so we're able to then correlate those IP addresses, MAC addresses, to all the other data points and figure out what's out there. And that's a lot of the ways we find unmanaged devices as well within environments.
Yeah, that's interesting. I back to the healthcare thing. I mean, not to name drop, but anyone that has watched Chris Roberts present on his Hacking a Human, the presentation that he gives is super scary because, and I'm sure, Lloyd, you guys have these conversations. I mean, as more and more things, including all of this medical devices, become connected to the internet, are we going to be at a point where they're like, hey, do you want your heart to keep working? Please send 3 Dogecoins over to wherever, right? So I think, again, being able to secure or have visibility into some of this stuff without affecting it, right? Because you can't touch any of these things, I think is going to be critical. So we're talking a lot about the visibility side of things, which is, of course, is critical. But so I get all this stuff into Axonius, and I've got all of this great information inside the system. Is there things I can do with that information through your system, or is it purely an informational scenario?
Yeah, actually, there's effectively 3 things. I think of it as 3 pillars of things that we do. The first thing is we collect the inventory, we bring it all into one place, we sort of normalize it. The second thing we do is with that query wizard, we give you the ability to uncover gaps or surface up conditions, or just ask questions in general, the sorts of things we've been talking about, right? And then the third thing that we do is we give you the ability to take action or say, okay, what's next? I have a thing, I have a condition, I have a situation. What do I want to do about that? And so we have a section of the GUI called the Enforcement Center. And what it is a library of over 50 different styles of actions that you can take. It basically gives you the ability to tap into things like, okay, run this query every 5 hours or 12 hours or once a day. And if I get any output from that, do these things. And it could be something as simple as sending an email to a group. It could be pushing a Slack message, or even taking the results of that query as a CSV and popping it onto a share. It could be tapping into the ticketing system, or something like ServiceNow. Maybe we want to update the database in ServiceNow with either data points or computers that aren't even in that system. So maybe we want to push data into an environment like that. So there's lots of different options we have there.
So how about like connectors into, say, a SOAR system or something? So I run a query and it says, hey, this part agent X is missing on 30% of your whatever, so that should have agent X on them. Is there, right. Do you have the ability to like trigger that off to something else to go and push those agents out to the missing 30%?
That specific class, you call, since you used it, I'll say it, SOAR, we don't tap into directly, but we do have something where we can say, if it's essentially through AD credentials, we can say, hey, if there's a missing executable, let's try to push it out there. Yeah, so we do have capabilities like that. And the real, I will call it out though, the real challenge there is everybody's working from home. So do we have access or the ability to leverage AD credentials for somebody that's sitting at home in their bunny slippers? So
yeah, and
that's a whole new challenge. And I think that's security, orchestration, automation, and response, right?
Yes. And we actually do have some roundabout ways to get to that. So one of our adapters is just sending information via webhook. And I know that some SOAR tools, you already mentioned it, can take that and take action off of it. We also have an extremely robust API that you can either, if you're really into the CLI stuff, you can get really geeky with it. But what's really interesting is you don't have to rewrite the queries. You can actually use a normal language to take your saved query and run it through the API and send it off to a Demisto or a Phantom. So I have some customers who do that as well, and they're using our API to connect to their SOAR platform to do the actual, sending out of data or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's lots of interesting ways to work through it. Like Darrin said, there's so many different actions you could take. But some of the ones we didn't mention too, just for instance, or let's say you find something out, you want to isolate an endpoint, you can trigger isolation via like your Carbon Black or your CrowdStrike, your SentinelOne. Let's say we find 50, in the new day, your developers spin up a bunch of new dev instances, and you have 50 new EC2 instances. And so now you're like, okay, what do I do with this? They're not being scanned by my vulnerability scanner. It didn't know about them. We can actually automatically add those to your next scan, those IP ranges, and you don't even have to have a human involved. So you're kind of closed looping it. We found the conditions, we're looking for it, we're actually bringing it back in and closing that loop. And even with the ServiceNow information, we can ingest information from ServiceNow so we know about what it knows about, but then we can also update it back in. So all of that robust data we're getting, we can put it back in. And I know that that's a big issue with those configuration databases is keeping them up to date, because it can potentially be such a time-consuming and manual process.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think historically, any sort of database like that, the hygiene of it has been terrible, or it's good for, and I think you guys mentioned it earlier, it's good for that hot second, and then everything changes, and then it's not that good anymore. I kind of came up through like Active Directory and identity management or whatever, and I say, people would say stuff about Active Directory, and I'm like, well, you do know it's Active Directory, right? It's not stable directory or consistent directory. Because I mean, the things are always changing, and then your information is out of date, and if you've got information that's out of date in any of those systems, well, then there's zero value to it anyway. So I like the fact that you guys can do that. Let's talk a little bit. One of my favorite parts of these conversations is when we start talking about working with a vendor and what that looks like. I can tell you, it's Thursday. I've had about 3 of these scenarios already this week, where if a company is looking to move away from one product to another product, it is probably 99% of the time a customer service and a relationship issue and not a technology issue. I have seen companies move away from what is maybe a better technology to a lesser technology simply because the customer service side of things is better. And that starts from the first demo all the way through to the purchase, through the long-term purchase. So let's talk a little bit about what that pre-sales situation looks like with you guys, and then maybe talk through the proof of concept. See, this is why we have those stupid things. We just don't like them. So I guess let's start with the pre-sales. What does a pre-sales engagement look like with you guys?
Sure. So typically we're obviously we want to line up the proper call, a well-qualified call. John and I would get on the call. We would find out about what the customer really has as a problem. And we, speaking for me and John, we are genuinely interested in what the problem is. Are we a good fit? I've been doing this a long time, and I certainly don't want to just sell somebody something just because, right? I want to actually solve a problem for them. I've been in SE for 20 years for some really cool companies, and I've prided myself on that as part of my personal ethic. So once we get there, we have a conversation, and frankly, the initial slide deck and part of our initial conversation is an interview of the customer. We want to understand, what are you doing now? How are you fixing this? Is this something that really keeps you up at night, or is it a problem? From there, we move into the demo. We show them what we can do, what we have to offer. If that's something they want, we do a POC. It's usually a proof of concept. It's a 30-day engagement. We structure it pretty well. I have a document that I put together. We come to an agreement on what our use cases are. We'll talk about some of the pain points that they have, what they want to solve, or at least test our ability to engage for, and solve for them. We build those out. We agree on the sources of data that we want to pull in. We do that entire process. We have a weekly cadence call during that proof of concept. At the end, we put a bow on it. Do they decide to buy or not buy? Then I sort of step back. John does his thing. And I mean, he's always engaged, but I'm less engaged towards the end when the business side comes in.
Isn't it great when you can shuffle that part over, and then you're like, this is the sales guy's time right
That's
now.
right. I feel like the guy with the mic. You're cool. You're cool. You're cool. I'm out. Like that.
Did my thing.
And then I'm gone.
Yeah, you have all the fun.
Bring it home, John.
All the
Bring it
bells and
home.
whistles, and then I have to have the hard conversations. No, but Darrin's made a great point, and is we're involved the whole time. So for myself, I'm on the first demo call. I'm on all the POC calls, if I can make them. And then after purchase, most of our customers desire to work with a TAM, and the whole time we're white glove service. Darrin's white glove. I mean, we'll stay up super late at night helping customers build out dashboards and queries and charts that slice and dice the data the way they want to see it so that they can present it to their board, to their analysts, so that everyone gets what they need out of it, whether they're in, their compliance side, their security side, or their IT operations side. And then we continue that. So I actually stay on my customer calls. If I can make a customer call, I'm on it. And I've got a lot of them. So the majority of my calendar, post-sales, the majority of my calendar is just sitting on those calls with customers that have already purchased. So I stay with them from the first demo until, as long as they're customers with us, because we pride ourselves in that white glove service, taking care of our customers, turning around adapters. I'm not going to give timeframes, but really fast. You
already said Darrin stays up all night, so
yeah,
I mean,
we've done it, and our developers are phenomenal, and all of us here, we want people to walk away with a smile. Like, we learned something, we feel good about this, and that's kind of what we strive for. I know Darrin and I, we have a great time on our demos and our POC calls, and that's really what we strive for. We want our customers to feel taken care of and really feel like their problems were solved.
So John, you said, hang on, Darrin, let me unpack a couple of things that John said there, because there was some really good stuff in what you just said there. Have some fun, man. Talk about an industry that could use a little more fun once in a while. And it's kind of the premise of this, right? I mean, this not another demo literally came from me watching a whole bunch of really bad demos one day, waking up in a panic attack in the middle of the night and being like, not another demo. And I was like, And so yeah, let's have a little bit of fun, right? I mean, this is serious business. We've got mission critical, life-saving, earth-saving work that we're doing every day. Man, we can have a smile once in a while, right? That's a t-shirt.
Once in a while.
I'm on fire today. When Anthony's not here, man, guns are out with all the corny dad jokes. He's here to keep me straight. Some other stuff that you said there about the end of the pre-sales. I want to touch on like that end of that. So some of the stuff that I like to see happen with the pre-sales is when it's a little bit more than just like, here's all the buttons and knobs that you can twist. So it sounds to me like you guys are working with the customer, like, here's some of my use cases, and you're helping them build that out through the POC. Now, my guess, I'm just hypothesizing here, is that can then roll into production. Is that?
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to step in and add to. Frankly, the POC is we're passive, right? We're pulling data in. We're not in line or anything like that. So right. Folks don't necessarily put us in a dev environment. I've only had one. It was a very large airline that just had some very, very, very strict requirements around their network and who could do what with it. And so we just had to stovepipe things a bit. Usually this goes in, we're pulling real data from the entire network. And what we do in the POC is we do just what you said. We're going to build queries out that prove out their use cases. So if their agents are their issue, if they're looking for unauthorized or rogue devices, maybe they're up against the maybe they have compliance with the National Defense Authorization Act, and they can't have certain Chinese vendors on their network, and so they want to know, do I have these particular vendors? Do I have cameras at my transit stations for that are these funky Chinese things that I'm going to get in big trouble for? Whatever it is, I will build that query out. We will then harness that query, build it into a dashboard. I'll tell you another thing that we do is a value add. If the customer at the end, like say week 3, they've said, yes, this is what we need, but we have to present this to our C-suite internally, I will coach them. I will help them with their PowerPoint presentation. If they need a sample deck to use, we do all of that. So yeah, we really try to help out. And the last thing I'll say is, when the sale finishes, they usually just cut it over. It's production system at that point. There's no having to reinvent the wheel or distribute any of this stuff.
And if I was just going to say, and if they were in dev, I've had that happen a couple times. Our SRE team will help, our reliability site engineering team will help them cut that over for them. They'll actually do the heavy lift. So you don't lose anything. It's going to be there the way you left it, pretty much. So.
See, I understand acronyms because those 3 words you put together there, they sound horrible next to each other. So the acronym does sound way, way better. Are you guys, is this an on-prem solution, an appliance solution, a SaaS solution? Can you talk a little bit about the infrastructure that runs Axonius?
Sure. The answer is yes. We do all of it. So we typically deploy as an OVA in a virtual environment on premise. We can use a number of virtual environments. So I've seen these come in as Nutanix. Sometimes, mostly it's VM, but we can accommodate various sort of styles of image if we need to. We can also deploy into your private cloud. So Amazon, Google, etc., Azure, we can roll up there. We also have a SaaS solution. And we have a SaaS solution, and we host that. And the question, sort of a follow-up question is, well, how do you get that environmental data that's on-prem up to the SaaS? And what we do is we tunnel it and encrypt it and push it out that way when we need to.
But if someone is concerned about that, they could always just keep it on-prem in a virtual machine or something, right? So it's not leaving.
Certainly.
And for data, privacy agreement reasons, most of my customers choose to host it themselves, whether it's on-prem or in their own Amazon Web Services. But back to kind of the POC and the white glove side of it and how we walk customers through this. Darrin and I will, get this this image over to them. They will deploy it. Sometimes we'll do it on a call with them, and it's encrypted. So it takes about 30 minutes to decrypt. And then they just start walking through the setup system and the GUI. And the thing that always takes the longest is plugging in the adapters. Not because the adapters are difficult, but because we coach them a lot beforehand. But make sure you have all your credentials you need to get into these tools, and you have the permission for them. Because we've been, delayed within our proof of concepts where they're realizing, oh wait, this team owns those credentials, this team owns that API, and so it takes 3 weeks to get all the data, all the credentials into one spot, and then put it all into Axonius. And so I just had a customer recently. We prepped them really well. They had it all taken care of, and in about an hour, they had it deployed. They had 7 adapters connected, and by like a couple hours later, we had their inventory built out, aggregated, correlated, and deduplicated. And so if you're ready for it, we can do it pretty quick.
Yep.
So even through the course of the POC, companies can begin to see how many silos and disparate systems that they have and all that sort of stuff as well, right? I mean, if you think about it, security's been around for quite a while. A lot of it was like network technology before that. Active Directory's been around forever and ever. Feels like forever and ever. I mean, a lot of these systems, have just been kind of layered on top of each other. So sure, you got different teams that are running different things. And this is, couple of things. Lloyd, we've learned some things today.
Yeah.
We've learned that what have we learned? There's like 6 things popped in my head, so now I got to put them in order. So I think this is really interesting because I think a lot of companies don't know, like you guys said earlier, they don't know what they don't know, and there's probably a lot of things that they don't know. Having something in place to help them simplify that, I think, is really important. I'm a huge fan of vendors that are willing to partner with their customers, that can have a little bit of fun now and then, that you can sense the passion of what they're doing. And I certainly am getting all of those vibes from you guys today. So I really appreciate you guys spending this time with us. We will have some more information in the description, which I think will be down below the video. Somewhere over here is a bell thing to click to subscribe. There's a like button down there. You can click those as well. Darrin, John, any last words?
I've got one, and then Darrin can close it out. The methodology we're talking about, we don't have a patent on it. Let's be honest. Where it comes down is our execution. And so what we've talked about, this idea of bringing the data sources together from different places, working on trying to find a way to deduplicate and correlate them. If you're not doing this, just do it now. Like, get started, because this is so important. And it's important not only to all the things we talked about, security, but even if you're going for different kind of compliance certificates and standards, like, you need this information, and it speeds up your audits, it speeds up all the things you're doing. So if you're not doing it, do it now. If it's too difficult for you, give me a call. And that's what I'd end it, because we'll have some fun.
I like it.
Yeah, for my part, I've been a pure security guy for 20 years. And so when I was approached with this opportunity, I thought, asset inventory, why would I want to do that? And then I felt the passion. I saw the product, and I realized everybody has this problem. Nobody has solved it. And frankly, the reason it's a problem, I realized, is that asset management is not sexy, right? Everybody wants to be on the UBA or user behavior analytics, or the big data thing, or the AI, or the artificial intelligence, or whatever it is that their team, the sexy thing. And so asset management,
advanced threat hunting, which is way cooler than regular threat hunting.
Right. So, it kind of falls by the wayside. So the passion and energy in this organization, and just the slickness of the technology, I was sold. So it's good stuff.
Well, I can always tell based on how fast the hours go and how easily the conversations flow, like what a company to work with a company is like. So kudos to you guys for knocking this out of the park today. Anyone that is watching, if you're having problems with asset management, meaning all of you, find that hour in your calendar. I know you got one in there somewhere. Talk with Axonius. Listen to what these guys have to say. From what I'm seeing here, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So with that, again, thank you, gentlemen. Awesome job, Lloyd, as always. And to the rest of you, we'll see you for episode 28. Thank you.
Thank you.